Picture our planet for a moment, just, teeming with life, vibrant rainforests, clear rivers, oceans just buzzing with species. It's beautiful, right? But it's more than that. It's this incredibly interconnected life support system. And the stark reality is that system is under threat. There's a global crisis unfolding that's really challenging, well, everything. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling these urgent crises, biodiversity loss and climate change. They're deeply linked. You've sent in some great sources, scientific papers, challenging economic ideas, reports from global summits, some real practical solutions too. So our mission today isn't just to lay out the facts. We want to get into the why it matters, the profound implications, and hopefully arm you with some insights into, tangible actions and the bigger systemic shifts needed. Okay, first things first, let's unpack this term. Biodiversity. What exactly are we talking about? It's not just lions and tigers, is it?
No, not at all. It's much bigger than that. Biodiversity covers the just astonishing variety of all life on Earth. We're talking species, sure, but also the habitats they live in, the genetic diversity within those species, and all those intricate ways they interact, how they form healthy ecosystems. One of our sources from the Natural History Museum puts it really well. It says this complexity creates healthy ecosystems and makes Earth the perfect place for us and all our fellow inhabitants to live, from earthworms to elephants. It's, like you said, Earth's life support system.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. And unfortunately, that system is under, critical strain. The sources you sent paint a pretty stark picture. Species are disappearing way, way faster than they naturally should.
Like 100 to 1,000 times faster than the normal background rate. It's a huge acceleration. And the numbers from the WWF's Living Planet report, the 2022 one, they're genuinely shocking. A 69% average drop in vertebrate populations, mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, amphibians since 1970. 69%.
Wow, since 1970. That's within many lifetimes.
Exactly. And it's even worse for freshwater species. They're down by a staggering 83% in the same time frame.
83%.
Yeah. It's why many scientists are calling this the sixth mass extinction event. And the key difference, this one's driven primarily by us, by human activity.
That really drives home the scale, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's not some distant problem happening elsewhere. Our sources point out where it's hitting hardest now, but also where the damage has maybe already been done.
That's a crucial point. The LSC explainer mentions that, yes, many recent losses are concentrated in the global south, places like Latin America, low and middle income countries. But, and this is important, it also clarifies that countries in the northern hemisphere, like the UK, which is identified as one of the most biodiversity depleted in the world.
Really? One of the most depleted?
Yes. They've already gone through massive historical destruction, centuries of it. So their current state kind of masks these profound past losses. It makes it a truly global issue, just at different stages.
Okay, so it's not just about losing individual species. One source talks about mutualism, these beneficial relationships between species. What makes these connections so vital? And maybe so fragile?
Oh, they're absolutely fundamental. They're not just like biological curiosities. They are engines driving biodiversity itself. Think about plants and the insects or birds that pollinate them, or corals and the tiny algae living inside them. That's mutualism.
Right, a win-win.
Exactly. These partnerships allow species to move into new areas, they boost how productive ecosystems are, they build complex food webs, and they basically allow more species to coexist in the same place. So when these relationships break down, the whole system is at risk. It can cause cascading failures because everything is so interconnected.
That paints a pretty sobering picture. Accelerating loss, interconnected systems breaking down. It makes you ask, okay, what's actually driving this? What are the root causes pushing us towards this edge?
Well, top of the list, no question, is habitat loss and degradation. That's the #1 driver, hands down. Converting forests, grasslands, wetlands, mainly for agriculture. It's happening at an incredible rate.
How fast are we talking?
One figure mentioned is a wooded area the size of 27 football pitches being destroyed every minute, just for agriculture.
Every minute, 27 pitches. It's hard to even grasp that.
It is, and the cumulative impact is huge. Over 75% of the Earth's ice-free land has been significantly altered by humans, over 60% of the oceans.
And wetlands, too, you mentioned.
Yeah, wetlands have been hit incredibly hard. Around 85% globally have been lost. These are vital ecosystems. And we're seeing critical systems like the Amazon rainforest getting dangerously close to a tipping point.
A tipping point meaning?
Meaning it could flip from being a rainforest to a much drier savanna-like state. The loss of biodiversity, the carbon released, it would be staggering.
Okay, so habitat destruction is #1. But climate change must be a huge factor too, right? How does that fit in?
It absolutely is. Right now, it's considered the second biggest cause of biodiversity loss in the ocean and fourth on land. But its impact is growing fast.
How does it directly affect species?
Rising temperatures force species to move to track the conditions they're adapted to. But often, as one source puts it, they have nowhere to run.
They hit barriers or just run out of space?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Or the climate is changing too fast. This leads to local extinctions, it shrinks populations, reduces genetic diversity, weakens the species' ability to adapt further.
And the oceans seem especially vulnerable again here.
They really are. You've got the warming itself, but also ocean acidification. That's the CO2 dissolving in seawater, making it more acidic.
Which harms things with shells.
Precisely. Creatures like crabs, oysters, sea urchins, even tiny plankton, they struggle to build their shells and skeletons. And then there's coral bleaching.
We hear a lot about that.
Yeah, warmer water stresses the corals, they expel the algae living with them, lose their color, and often die. These reefs are like the rainforests of the sea, incredibly diverse. Losing them is catastrophic for marine life.
So it sounds like a vicious cycle. Climate change harms biodiversity, but does biodiversity loss also make climate change worse?
It absolutely does. It's a dangerous, positive feedback loop. Think about forests, soils, peat bogs. These are enormous natural carbon sinks. They pull CO2 out of the atmosphere and store it.
Right, helping regulate the climate.
Exactly. But when we degrade or destroy these ecosystems, cut down forests, drain peatlands, their ability to absorb carbon plummets. Worse, they often release the carbon they've stored for centuries back into the atmosphere. The Amazon, for example, parts of it, are now actually emitting more carbon than they absorb. That's a terrifying switch.
A sink becoming a source. That's alarming. Okay, besides habitat loss and climate change, what other direct human impacts are piling on the pressure?
There's quite a list, unfortunately. Pollution is a big one, pesticides from farming, plastic waste choking rivers and oceans. Even light and noise pollution disrupt natural behaviors.
Right, noise. Really?
Yes, they can interfere with migration, breeding patterns, predator-prey relationships. Then you have overfishing and overhunting, which can just decimate populations and unravel food webs. And don't forget invasive species. Global trade and travel move species around, and some become invasive, outcompeting native wildlife. Plus, the illegal wildlife trade exotic pets, traditional medicine, ornaments that puts huge pressure on specific, often already vulnerable species.
Okay, those are the direct impacts. But some of the sources you sent dig deeper into the underlying economic systems. There's this idea of an impact inequality.
Right, this is where it gets really fundamental. The paper on economic factors underlying biodiversity loss makes a powerful argument. It says that modern economics has this basic flaw. It treats the human economy as if it's separate from nature, not embedded within it.
So like nature's just an external resource supplier or a place to dump waste.
Pretty much. The paper says we've been essentially pilfering from nature. We use all these services, clean air, water, pollination, climate regulation, without properly accounting for them, let alone paying for them.
It's like running a business and not tracking the depreciation of your essential machinery.
Exactly. And that links directly to GDP, gross domestic product. The paper points out GDP is a really misleading measure of well-being.
How so?
Because it measures economic flow, the value of goods and services produced in a year, but it completely ignores the stock of our most vital asset, natural capital.
Natural capital being the forests, the fish stocks, the fertile soil, the clean water.
All of that, the ecosystems and resources that actually underpin our well-being and economy. So GDP can go up even while we're depleting the natural capital that sustains us. It gives a false sense of progress.
Okay, so if GDP is flawed, what's the alternative? How should we measure progress?
The authors propose focusing on inclusive wealth. This is a broader measure. It includes produced capital, buildings, machines, human capital, skills, health, and natural capital.
So it accounts for nature's value.
Yes. And the crucial insight is this. Inclusive wealth increases over time if and only if well-being across the generations increases over time. It directly links economic performance to genuine sustainable development.
That's a major reframing. And this flawed thinking, ignoring natural capital, leads to this impact inequality you mentioned.
Exactly. Our total demand on nature, our ecological footprint, now massively exceeds what the planet can regenerate sustainably. The estimate is we're currently using resources equivalent to about 1.7 Earths each year.
1.7 Earths.
Yeah. And what's really sobering is the calculation that even if rich countries halved their consumption, globally, we'd still be using about 1.3 Earths. It highlights that it's not just about consumption patterns in wealthy nations. Overall global population size is also a critical factor in this overshoot.
And this overshoot isn't just millions of individual choices, right? It points to bigger systemic issues.
Definitely. The paper calls them institutional failures. Things like not having clear ownership or rights over natural resources, especially commons like the atmosphere or the high seas.
The tragedy of the commons idea.
Right. If no one owns it, everyone exploits it. And also how commercial demands, often international, can override local needs and sustainable practices, particularly where governance is weak.
Okay, that's a deep and, frankly, quite daunting picture of the causes. But let's pivot to solutions. There is hope. There are paths forward. What's happening on the global policy front?
Absolutely. There's movement. A key development is the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the KMGBF. It was adopted at the UN Biodiversity Conference, COP15, in 2022. It sets out 23 global targets to achieve by 2030. Things like protecting 30% of land and sea, restoring degraded ecosystems, reducing pollution.
The 30 by 30 target. We hear about that one.
Yes, that's probably the most well-known. Now, the follow-up meeting, COP16 in late 2024, saw some progress. There was the creation of the Cali Fund for sharing benefits from genetic resources, strengthening indigenous rights. But realistically, progress on the big things like funding and setting up robust monitoring systems has been, well, pretty slow.
So the blueprint exists, but turning into action is the challenge.
Exactly. Leaders involved, like China's Minister Huang Runqiu, who presided over COP15, stressed the need to speed up practical measures. China itself is often cited as an example of strong political will, leading to action increasing forest cover, ecosystem restoration, protecting species like the giant panda, even seeing mangrove forests increase. And one source suggests, given how hard it is to actually count all species accurately,
Right, it must be almost impossible.
a more practical policy approach might be focusing on setting clear limits on habitat destruction and establishing those protected areas, like 30 by 30. It's more concrete and measurable.
Okay, that connects back to the economics. How do we actually transform business and finance to value nature properly?
This is critical. That economic factors paper argues very strongly that investments in nature, say, restoring a wetland, shouldn't be dismissed by old-school cost-benefit analysis. Why? Because the value of nature services is actually increasing as they become scarcer. So the future benefits of restoration are likely much higher than we typically calculate.
So conservation can actually be a better long-term economic bet than destructive development.
Often, yes, especially when you factor in the rising scarcity price of natural capital. It flips the traditional calculation.
And what about those subsidies you mentioned earlier? The ones encouraging destruction.
Right, the perverse incentives. Globally, estimates are we spend $4 to $6 trillion a year on subsidies that harm the environment. Fossil fuels, harmful agriculture, unsustainable fishing.
Trillions.
Yes, effectively giving a negative price for nature, encouraging its plunder. Removing these would be a massive lever for change, shifting consumption away from nature-damaging goods.
And paying for using nature's services.
Yeah, the idea of payments for ecosystem services, PES. We need international systems where users of global commons, like shipping companies using the oceans or industries emitting CO2, actually pay for that use. Those funds could then be channeled to nations, perhaps paying them to conserve vital ecosystems like rainforests within their borders. It requires big transformative thinking, maybe like the institutions set up after World War II.
What about companies? Are they starting to get it? Is corporate accountability shifting?
There are definitely signs of change. One source noted that while maybe the number of corporate nature initiatives dipped slightly, the quality seems to be improving. Businesses are starting to genuinely adapt their models, and we have frameworks emerging to help them. Things like the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, TNFD.
TNFD, like
Yeah.
TCFD for climate.
Exactly. Helping businesses understand and report their dependencies and impacts on nature, translating ecological risks into financial terms. There's also the Science-Based Targets for Nature, SBTN. These provide pathways for companies to set credible targets. And already, over 500 companies have committed to voluntary reporting through these kinds of frameworks.
That's promising. What about the issue of rich countries outsourcing their environmental footprint?
That's a really important point raised in the economics paper. The UK, for instance, might have strong environmental laws at home, but its consumption relies heavily on imports that drive biodiversity loss elsewhere.
So transferring the impact.
Yes, and often transferring wealth from poorer, resource-rich nations to wealthier, consuming nations. One suggested solution is for global south countries to collectively impose export taxes on nature-intensive commodities. That could generate revenue for conservation locally and ease the pressure on their ecosystems.
Okay, so that's policy, economics, corporate action. What about innovative, hands-on solutions, nature-based approaches?
Yeah, there's lots of exciting stuff happening here. Technology is playing a role like reforestation drones. Companies like Biocarbon Engineering use drones to plant trees way faster and cheaper than traditional methods.
Drones, planting trees.
Cool.
Yeah, and developing sustainable alternatives to damaging products. Think lab-grown meat potentially reducing the massive land footprint of livestock farming, or using microalgae as an alternative to palm oil.
Right, palm oil being a big driver of deforestation.
Exactly. These substitutes can really lessen the pressure.
And what about solutions for the oceans? We talked about the problems there earlier.
Definitely. Vertical ocean farming is a really promising one. Initiatives like Green Wave are pioneering systems growing things like kelp, mussels, scallops, oysters together.
Underwater gardens, sort of?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
It tackles overfishing by providing alternative seafood. It creates habitat, and this is key. It requires no fresh water, no feed, no fertilizer. It's incredibly sustainable.
That sounds amazing. And more broadly, just harnessing nature's own power. Yes, nature-based solutions, or NBS. This is huge.
Okay.
Restoring forests, mangroves, peatlands, even just adding green spaces in cities. These actions alone could provide maybe 20% to even over a third of the climate mitigation needed to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius by 2030.
So working with nature helps both biodiversity and climate.
Absolutely. And it makes economic sense, too. The estimate is every dollar invested in ecosystem restoration generates around $30 in economic benefits, plus it creates jobs.
But it's not just about planting any tree anywhere, right? You mentioned nuances earlier.
Crucial point. Just planting huge areas of a single non-native species of monoculture might capture some carbon, but it's terrible for biodiversity.
Okay.
Mixing diverse native species is much better. Agroforestry, integrating trees into farms is also beneficial. And critically, you have to plant in the right place. Planting trees on natural grasslands, peatlands, or tundra can actually be harmful. It can disturb existing carbon stores and release more carbon, plus harm unique existing ecosystems. So local ecology knowledge is key.
That makes sense. It needs careful thought. Okay, so we have policy, economics, innovation. But ultimately, the sources seem to suggest that laws and markets alone might not be enough, especially for nature's quieter processes. What's the deepest shift needed?
Yeah, several sources touch on this. They argue the most profound change has to come from within us, from our mindset. It's about fostering a genuine affection for nature's workings, appreciating its infinite complexity and mystery, not just seeing it as resources.
Moving beyond just utility.
Exactly. That economics paper even suggests a radical reform of education is needed, making us all naturalists from primary school onwards, instilling that connection and understanding from a young age.
A fundamental shift in our relationship with the living world.
That seems to be the core idea.
So wrapping this up, we've seen today how deeply intertwined these crises of climate change and biodiversity loss really are. But crucially, their solutions are often intertwined too.
Yeah, from rethinking our economic yardsticks like GDP and embracing inclusive wealth, to global agreements like the KMGBF, getting companies on board with frameworks like TNFD.
To exciting innovations like vertical farming and smart reforestation and just fundamentally restoring natural systems, the paths forward seem clearer.
They do. But it's not just a challenge for governments or big corporations. It's really a call to action for all of us, individually and collectively. To demand better from our systems, yes, but also to make more conscious choices in our own lives. And remembering that those small changes, when lots of people make them, can add up to something monumental.
Absolutely. So here's something maybe to mull over as you go about your day, a final thought building on all this. What does it truly mean, for you personally, to view the human economy not as separate from, but as profoundly embedded within nature? How might that fundamental shift in perspective change your daily decisions, maybe beyond just the obvious recycling or energy use, and how could it inspire you to connect with the living world around you in a maybe deeper, more meaningful way?